You're listening to the Valley Current.
Jack, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Thanks for coming on such a moment's notice, but we had such a breaking set of news from the Supreme Court. Someone violated their privacy rights. Someone violated the Supreme Court's privacy rights and released what I guess is the Chief Justice has said is an authentic draft from February, obviously in only, of a reversal of Roe versus Wade, I guess based on a 5-4 split, because it looks like the Chief Justice is joining the minority, right?
Well, he wanted to uphold the Mississippi law, but not reverse Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And that would have been a more sort of a standard response by the court here.
Right.
It wasn't necessary to reach all the way to Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just stunning to see a case that I guess is 50 years old now. I mean, I remember it from law school, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, I remember those reviews that were done by the Senate where they said, hey, everyone was like, hey, it's established law. We've got to respect it. It's been affirmed. It's been this, it's been that. And it's amazing to me that with the opening couple of paragraphs are pretty telling, because it's almost like, hey, we made a huge mistake here, right?
Yeah, and how long has it been since you read Roe v. Wade?
Well, probably at least 45 or more years. I mean, it's not, I think I went back to it when you and I were doing that podcast last month. And
I went back to it for that.
Right.
I hadn't read it since law school either. Mm-hmm. And I must tell you that after reading it, although I wholeheartedly like the result, I didn't think it was a very persuasive opinion. I thought the digressions into historical stuff, which were not really convincing or academically solid, I thought a lot of things were not really convincing. And as much as I have distaste for Alito's results here, have you read his opinion?
Yeah, I read the 98 pages actually last night, late. Yeah, I mean, what I got was 98 pages, but maybe printed in some oddball way. What is it, 60 actual printed?
No. The last 30 pages are an appendix giving all the statutes outlawing abortion.
Wow. Okay.
So the real text of the opinion ends on page 68 or something.
Right. The first page of it pretty much tells you exactly where they're going and why they're getting there. And it's so unabashed in almost the way you would think a legislature might write something that reverses a statute, right? I mean,
well, he has a lot of argument about Roe v. Wade was a legislative act, not a judicial act. You know, that's the thrust of his argument, basically. Mm-hmm. He's not arguing that abortion is evil. He's arguing that Roe v. Wade represented a departure by the Supreme Court from its proper role. And it's an interesting argument. What do you think about it?
Well, I have to say, the part that's shocking, three things that are shocking for me. I'll put it on the screen. We're talking about, of course, the Politico, which is not a printed magazine. It's an online paper. It's been an online paper almost from the start. They released essentially a stolen document. I guess that's the best way to put it, because it was not authorized for release. And we all know that the Supreme Court guards its security of its computer systems pretty well. So Politico, which is www.politico.com, released this first draft is the way it's marked.
Right.
And it even has sort of the internal markings from the court that, you know, the old style. I don't remember when you used to get paper documents that had a little slip of paper on a corner that says who's it to, who's it from, circulate, recirculate. I mean, it's all done by computers now, but they still follow kind of the old-fashioned, here's the list, right? And, you look at that list to say, well, that's kind of interesting. They assigned it to Alito, which means they obviously debated which way this was going to go. And then Alito is getting to write the majority. And, if you look at the document, it starts, abortion presents a profound moral issue. You were talking about that last month when we had the podcast last month. You were saying this is sort of a curious area to talk about as a moral issue on which Americans hold sharply conflicting views. Now, the latest poll I saw suggested that it was split sort of 60% thinks that sort of some abortion when some restrictions is appropriate. 20% think it's totally to be stopped, abortion, and 20% are like, anything goes. It's like a weird split where the majority in the middle seem to be okay with Roe v. Wade, right? They're sort of okay with that approach, right?
I read a poll that said 69% wanted to stay in place.
Right. So you would
69% of voters.
Right. So you would think in some ways, I'm just trying to get to the page where they provide. Yeah. So there's already been protests. That's the part that I didn't get. Like, how do you organize protests that fast? This thing was just last night, right?
Right.
I mean, how do you figure this occurred? It must have been an internal clerk or staff member that was protesting that this was being done in a way without maybe enough deliberation, although it's a first draft from February, so it's kind of old, right?
Yes.
You would think it would be, but we're in May, you would think it would be like draft 6 or something. So maybe maybe there is a draft. Maybe there is a later draft. We just don't have it. And this guy could have gotten it in February or March and alerted these people to get ready for protests. So you're saying this is more like a delayed, it's been in the hands of the organizers, but they decided, hey, we're going to wait for good weather in Washington when the cherry blossoms are out and do the protest then, right? It's a pretty amazing thing that, so much information can fly over the transom so fast, right? And they even have like highlights. If you look at the actual document on the screen, what do you think of the writing? Let's just start there. I mean, we hold a road. To be honest, he must be overruled.
Well, to be honest, I thought Alito's opinion is well reasoned and well presented. Mm-hmm. I don't like it, but I'm going to have to think about how I would respond to it if I were lawyering in this case. There's a lot of reasons to think that Roe v. Wade was a mistake. Mm-hmm. He's giving us a lot of reasons to think so. And I'd like to think it through a little bit, even though I love the result of Roe v. Wade, and it was part of our identity as a country to have Roe v. Wade in 1973.
Right.
The idea of women's control over her own body and women's right to choose, that's very basic stuff. And by the way, the hostility to abortions is a mystery to me. I don't know why people feel that way, why they're against abortion. For me, it's up to the mother, basically.
Right.
And I don't know why people have a different attitude.
Well, I think conceptually you get to this sort of religious question of when does life start? I mean, you could argue life starts even before conception, if you want to say there's an egg that can be fertilized and a sperm that can fertilize it. There's a form of male and female life there. Whether it's, going to actually cause something to happen is, the odds of success. Of course, there's so many people that try to have kids and can't. And then so many people that end up by mistake or bad planning or a night out with too many drinks. I mean, and I always thought of it as, hey, this is a woman's right of privacy with her doctor. She has a medical condition initially called pregnancy. it is a medical condition. You do go typically to a hospital to give birth, and it's presumably an unwanted pregnancy. And the woman's consulting with her, typically her gynecologist, and that's between them. We talked about fiduciary duties. There's a tight fiduciary duty there that the state typically shouldn't invade. It's probably as strong as the husband and wife type fiduciary duty. Yeah. Of course, there was conflicts about you have to alert the husband, and that was covered in Casey. And you get to some question of, well, where's a woman's autonomy start and end, and where does the doctor's role start and end? And Blackmun in the original decision, basically drew the lines along the trimesters, which seemed pretty arbitrary to me at the time, given that technology keeps changing things and allows life to probably start at the moment of conception and maybe even potentially be preserved. And, the contrast I want to bring up, which I thought was really interesting, is we have all these strong laws of privacy that are being entered from a statutory point of view, almost like bear hugging everything, saying Facebook has to protect privacy, and doctors have HIPAA, have to protect privacy, and commercial parties have to protect privacy, and lawyers have to protect privacy. And everyone's got to have these highly secure digital systems for protecting privacy. And now this whole constitutional principle of a woman's right to choose, which is really an extension of Griswold and the right of privacy found by, who was the justice that did that? It was the really liberal guy. Oh, who was he? Brother.
Just a minute,
Yeah, you remember. He was super liberal from Yakima, Washington.
Douglas.
Douglas, yeah, Justice Douglas. Yeah, I mean, he wrote that penumbra decision of privacy rights.
Yeah,
come out of the Constitution as a penumbra of other rights. And, I always thought it was kind of creative, but, in some ways, I don't think the founders thought a lot about privacy. They probably just assumed that people would be civil and you wouldn't have to do this stuff. But I thought that was a correctly decided decision. And I thought at the end of the day, people should not have anyone asking them questions about what contraceptives are they using or not using. And, your home is your castle, and the state shouldn't be able to invade what you do inside your home. Right. I believe he had that right. So then, of course, a lot of stuff flows from that. And in many ways, you have to ask, are they attacking that very principle of the right to privacy as being a constitutional right? Is that where this is going to go?
What I understand, yeah, I think Alito is attacking it because he believes that in order to be a penumbral right, various conditions have to be satisfied, and he argues they are not satisfied. So he will vote to take down Griswold and all the other, Obergefell, I don't know where that will come, all these cases that revolve around the right to privacy as a penumbral right. He will say the Constitution doesn't support them. Legislatures have to make that decision. That's where he will end up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing people should understand that most people don't is the 50 states are like 50 different sovereigns. They're like 50 different countries, you could argue, by analogy. Right. And whenever you do something at a federal level, you're constraining the right of a group of people in a state from a majority point of view to decide, well, in Utah, we do things differently, I mean, years ago, Utah allowed polygamy, and that was okay. Right. And so conceptually, the genius of the United States, if it is a genius, is somehow you can get 50 states to cooperate on an interstate highway and cooperate on telecommunications and the internet and a lot of stuff that helps the entire 50 states. And then maybe you could set some floors for things that really do affect and create externalities for other states, like pollution and that sort of thing. And then you get into this Bill of Rights stuff, which is, well, how do you feel about driving through Alabama and the law is completely different, and you don't really know about the law in Alabama, and you don't know that the law in Mississippi says you can or can't do something. You're from New York, and we really have kind of this 26 states that go one way and 24 go another way. It's pretty evenly divided if you think about it. It really is like the black and the red, the blue and the red, right?
Back to your point, when I ask, why are people so intensely opposed to abortion? And you say because it's the moral issue of life. You can't take a human life.
Right.
But war is okay. Execution is okay.
Yeah, the execution stuff, right? That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
That's another area.
So what people really believe is sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And that raises the question of why is abortion a can't? It seems like a very logical mother can before the infant is born. So I don't agree with or understand the hostility towards abortion, and I don't think the state should respect it, particularly, in my opinion.
Right.
Because I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, you're liberal, I'm liberal. Most people in New York are liberal. Most people in California are liberal. And, part of the liberal thesis is the right of choice is pretty much an individual right. And, this stuff has criminal consequences. So it's not like, oh, you're going to get a little fine for, doing something that's an infraction. It's a criminal charge. And the doctor can potentially lose his license and get imprisoned. I mean,
absolutely.
It's not a great thing.
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea. And by the way, that has been the law for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Abortion was a crime, a felony. And Alito quotes a lot of Blackthorne and other, legal authorities from the 17th century, 15th century. It's been a crime for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, the relationship with religion and following the 10 Commandments or the belief that you are self-righteousness, that kind of attitude is right here. And it's very offensive to me.
Well, it's almost at the level of, look, groups of people, whether based on religion or beliefs or anything else, can organize. And the part that I think is taken for granted is you don't have most of the population in the United States can't just turn on a dime and move to New York from Mississippi. It's crazy. I mean, maybe if you're sitting in an ivory tower in Washington, D.C., having everything sort of handled for you, you think, what's the big deal? So if a person doesn't want, if they don't like Mississippi law, the genius of the United States is they can move to another state. I don't think most of the US population that has barely one paycheck in savings, if that, they live from paycheck to paycheck. They just can't uplift and say, I'm moving. Right. I'm out of here. I don't like the law anymore. The top 10% elite, sure. Top 20%, maybe, sure. And even they have a lot of inertia for moving. So as the law starts to take away rights, or as the Constitution gets reinterpreted, I mean, the shocking thing, I saw a quip somewhere that said, I don't even know how to teach constitutional law anymore. There was a professor who left a note or something to me saying, I don't really know how to explain this to my students. It just is sort of a mockery of the view that we have a constitution. It gets interpreted by a majority. There's principles of stare decisis that then get followed. And it's not a political document. It's like, that's our reading. That's it. That's the way it's going to go down. Thank you very much. We're done. And then all of a sudden, a new sheriff comes into town named Donald Trump on a close election. He brings in 3 new justices. They all say it's established law. We respect stare decisis. So they all eventually make it through the Senate. Maybe they wouldn't have had they said, look, everything can get redone at any time. They were all pretty striking in their testimony, I thought. And now it's like, that's the past and that this is the present, right?
Undermining trust in the Supreme Court itself as an institution is a huge result of all this.
It's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's very upsetting Alito has 10 pages on why stare decisis is not locked in stone, graven in stone. Did you read that? Do you find that persuasive? His five aspects of the prior decision have to be evaluated, whether it was mistaken, whether it has high quality, whether it's practical. You saw his discussion of that. Workability.
Yeah, I wasn't very persuaded by it. I mean, I think it would get probably a A- in exam, or maybe even A+ for analysis. But I don't think if you actually took that approach across the entire range of Supreme Court jurisdiction, you'd probably have to reverse about a third of the cases.
He gives a long list of cases that have been reversed.
Right.
He mentions those. It's on page 36 of his opinion.
I mean, to me,
starts.
That's like saying, look, it really is a very dynamic game. And the dynamic game is a function of technology, of attitudes, of, a ton of different things. And we really just interpret the rules of the game based on the dynamic data that we're seeing. And it's almost like the dynamic data we're seeing is the country is splitting into 50 different countries. And we're going to let the 50 different countries essentially operate with autonomy.
Well, another way of looking at it is Congress could pass a national law authorizing abortion.
Yeah,
and
but
then
can they actually do that?
Well, not today, but maybe they will. But Alito would not object to that. What he's objecting to is not the single law. He's objecting to the fact that the court made the law.
Right.
He thinks the legislature should make the law. That's his argument in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a view that states have a lot more power, or should, than the Bill of Rights, and that whatever we stretch out of the Bill of Rights has to be compared and contrasted to what we're doing to the power of the states to decide the way they want to set the rules and how they want to go about their particular limits to what doctors can do, or lawyers can do, or anyone else can do. Almost like saying the federal expanse of rights and limitations both ways need to be shrunk. Like needs to be more of a shrunk system, not something that adds more to the agenda, but delegates more to the states or reaffirms more to the states, right?
Yeah, but of course, evaluating the practical effects of this, Roe v. Wade has been around for 49 years, since 73.
Right.
And generations of women have assumed they had the right to decide on abortion. But what is the actual effect of this? How many people really need abortions given contraception has improved so much today? So how does it really play out in real life? I don't know if we know. I know a lot of people will suffer, though. And I certainly feel every state should allow it if the woman wants it. I was interested in Casey v. It wasn't, no. It was Planned Parenthood v. Casey, right?
Right.
Where one of the aspects of the rule was you have to get the husband's okay.
Right.
And I noticed that abortion laws usually say, except for rape and incest.
Right.
And they should add the provision, except in cases where the father and the mother both agree that they want an abortion. Because then their interests seem to me to be greater than the states, since they are the citizens who are involved.
Right.
And the whole abortion dialogue is too much about women only without thinking about men's responsibility. And of course, it all goes back to the woman is there to bear children for the Lord, for the Señor. And those things are offensive, very offensive. I don't know where it'll go, Jack. What do you think we can do, you and I as lawyers?
Well,
what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, it was the other interesting comment I saw is the public defenders are organizing because they feel like they're the first line of contact to a woman who's charged, or a doctor who's charged with some criminal law violation, whether in Mississippi or Florida or wherever it occurs. So they're actually sort of fundraising and doing a bunch of stuff to set up whatever defenses. Now, I wanted to mention something that came out of our previous podcast where we kind of previewed this decision. We didn't expect it for a while, which is why we're doing.
I expected it in June.
Right, exactly.
June.
We ended the podcast saying we'll revisit it in June. Well, this got accelerated by the leak. There is this morning after pill that I guess has been perfected. Now, I don't know if a state's going to try to outlaw that. On
several states.
On some view that represents the killing of a life illegally.
Absolutely. I've forgotten which state it is, but some of the new laws outlaw morning after pills.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's going pretty far, right? Because you decide what to put in your body, you decide what to drink, you decide what to ingest, you decide what to smoke. I mean, go down a whole list of things. The state seems to be opening up to, you should have freedom to smoke marijuana. Like people are talking about psychedelic mushrooms. There's films now that maybe LSD is going to come back because, this was something that was being experimented by a bunch of people in the 50s and the 60s. And maybe it's going to give people new creative insight. Dr. Leary, if I'm remembering his name.
Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary. There was a film about him saying he was actually kind of ahead of his time and was doing stuff that we'll eventually all do. And states seem to be open to that sort of personal freedom, even though we know it has traffic accident consequences. It has suicidal consequences. It has so many different consequences that are arguably harmful to life, but we let people do it. So now here's someone that says, hey, I made a mistake with some guy last night and he's not the right dad and I'm not the right mom for his child or our child. I got a pill here. This is fine. Thank you very much. And to say, oh, you just violated the criminal law in the state of Mississippi or the state of Florida, that's like quite a statement when you go in that direction. That's a pretty big, ginormous statement, if you ask me. And I have a hard time with that. I have a hard time imagining that we're going to somehow outlaw that kind of freedom, right?
I've forgotten what state it is, but several of the new statutes include prohibition against morning after pills. And the difference from LSD is LSD has benefits unrelated to negatives, but the morning after pill is just for abortion. It's just a substitute for abortion. So it has no other justification. I don't see the reason that the state has to be concerned about it, but a lot of people do. So they're trying to ban it. Absolutely.
Well, I don't think it's a prescription medication. I think it's like over the counter in some states. Maybe that's the one way they kind of stop it. But if you think about it, if it doesn't involve the doctor and someone buys, like someone said to me recently, or I read somewhere recently, if an older person wants to kind of end their life, there's obvious ways to do it. But one of them, it's very subtle, is you could take like 10 Tylenols. I didn't know this. That's an overdose of Tylenol. Your liver will essentially not be able to process that much Tylenol. That's an over-the-counter drug. I mean, you can buy a bottle of Tylenol. I think it's 30 or 60 pills. There's obviously 10 in there. They don't load in, only 5 at a time because they want to protect people against their stupidity. But conceptually, I don't know that you can stop someone that wants to do that and say, no, that's an assisted suicide. Well, they're doing it to themselves, right? I mean,
doing it to themselves. But if I give them the Tylenol, I'm guilty.
Right. So the doctor's out of the picture. That's the way I think of this morning after pill. If the doctor's out of the picture and the woman is making a choice, it's really kind of in her own private world. There's no one else involved. For all we know, it's the right decision. It's a decision that's being made. Just like you could say, people make all kinds of crazy or different decisions than other people make about using marijuana, using other drugs, and thinking that it's the right thing for me to do. We don't say they're criminals. We don't talk about them as
you and I don't.
We don't. But even in
we
these
don't.
states, I think even the proponents of essentially anti-abortion stuff, I even think they have a hard time saying, well, what is it? What are we really doing here? Now, maybe I just haven't investigated enough, and maybe you're right that they're like, hey, you're stopping sperm, and maybe we should outlaw Trojans and other contraceptives because that's stopping sperm from getting to an egg, and that's what's supposed to happen, right?
And vasectomy. What about vasectomy?
Right. Well, I won't name his name, but one of my law partners, years ago was like, hey, man, you should do what I did. I didn't want to have any more kids. I just looked at him like, you were okay getting an operation? He said, absolutely. I just find it so much more convenient. And I thought that was extreme at the time, just because, but this is a very common practice among men that have younger spouses, I'm sure.
Sure.
It's interesting.
Sure. But going back to what you were saying, what are the public defenders going to do? I mean, if these laws are not struck down, what can a public defender do if somebody violates these laws?
Well, I think they try to fabricate, I don't want to say fabricate, or set up a medical argument. Like this was because one of the comments I made is, are we creating a lot more stress for younger women now? Like, I can't imagine. I'll just drop a footnote here. I went back to New York this weekend for my 50th anniversary of my high school graduation class.
Oh, okay.
So I went back, and my school, when I went there, was a Jesuit, strict, all boys, religious, super religious, run by brothers, almost like university style campus. No women, no women allowed on campus, no nuns, no female teachers. They changed that rule towards the end as we were graduating. They allowed some female teachers. I think they just couldn't find male teachers anymore. And a lot of the brothers were leaving the brotherhood. And I go into the campus, and there's all these women dressed up in the high school garb. I'm like, are there females now in this all boys school? They say, oh yeah, we changed that like 20 years ago. Where have you been? And so now it's boys and girls together. And, it was like hard for me to imagine because, of course, they're all beautiful teenage girls, and they're all smart because it's hard to get into school and it's hard to succeed in it. And they're all extremely bright. And I thought to myself, wow, that would have been quite a change for us. I can't even imagine what would have happened. But I was thinking to myself, if you're like 17 years old and a senior, high school senior going on 18, and you're like, wow, I got to be like super careful now. I mean, it's New York, so they're probably okay. But conceptually, we may have changed the mental health for a lot of women across the nation just by the pre-publication of this, right? I mean, I don't think they're going to reverse it. I don't know if they're going to rewrite it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of scholarly criticism. It's almost like crowdsourcing editing at this point. Different people comment. This is like an amazing thing to see something in draft form. And there was somebody, I think in the New York Times or Wall Street, somewhere, they said prior version of something else that was leaked years ago that got a lot of commentary. And they talked about there was a clerk that admitted to it. And I'll try to find that article for you, but they said this is not unprecedented. This had happened before, but not with all the fanfare of all the protests and whatnot that seem to have been organized almost overnight. I mean, it's just amazing to me how fast. But you're right. They may have just planned it. They may have planned it for a while.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to meditate a little bit further on it. I don't know what I can do personally to advance the cause. I really don't. And I do feel very strongly that women should have the right to choose.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting question is the briefing and the argument are totally done. But maybe what they have to do to just generate some greater legitimacy is allow another round of argument and maybe allow a new set of amicus briefs to come in, where people have essentially seen like a tentative decision, and they get the views from all the professors, including people who are going to say, now, wait a minute, you told the Senate, and, like literally put Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Amy Coney, and all of them on the spot, and say, wait a minute, something doesn't add up here, and just force, to some degree, some level of accountability, because the Supreme Court is otherwise basically unaccountable. Like, you could say Congress can change things, but by and large, the Supreme Court is the last word on what the Constitution means and what it doesn't mean, and so on. So to me, there could be something good that comes out of this, but I think they'd have to be open as a group to taking the criticism and then doing some massive level of re-argument, like almost 6 hours of argument to be divided among the best scholars to make the arguments. And maybe that could change things. I mean, it might be an interesting event in the life of the court. I mean, if I were Roberts, or if I were advising Roberts, I'd say you've got to do that. You got to try to create some new legitimacy, because if you just force this thing down, like, this was a theft and blah, 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 but we're just publishing it as is, this is it, that's just not going to do well for the future of the court at all.
I agree. I like Roberts, by the way. I kind of trust him.
Yeah.
To my surprise.
Yeah.
He's been better than I expected.
Yeah, he's turned out to have really taken the position to a new level to some degree. Right. As a relatively young guy. Now he's not so young, his health is not so great. But basically, he's done better than I would have expected. Because he didn't really have a ton of experience. I mean, he was at a big firm and he did some arguments in the Supreme Court, but he didn't really see like what Sotomayor has seen. She was a district judge and she saw every level of what goes on in the district court. I mean, I think she's actually the most experienced person from a judicial point of view on the court right now. I think all the rest are like, Gorsuch was a law professor, but he didn't really see a lot. And he was a Court of Appeal justice judge for a while, but when you're on, that's an ivory tower too. And so to me, we need more people that have some real life street experience, if you ask me. I mean, right now it's a very elite group of people, relatively speaking. If you ask me.
Ketanji Brown Jackson is good.
I think she's going to add some real street savvy to the court, which should be good.
I think so.
It should be interesting what happens. I think the other thing that's going to happen, frankly, I'll just predict this. I think Alito is probably on his way out. I just think he's getting old, and just like Breyer, I think these guys are realizing that the last few years of their life shouldn't be under the stress of the bright lights of the court.
How old is he? How old is Alito?
I want to say he's like something like 82 or something like that. And we could find
really?
That. Yeah, he's not a young.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not. I mean, it's an old, relatively speaking. Now, of course, it's got some youth on it, but it's he's the most senior. I think he's technically, after Breyer, he's the most senior justice.
I didn't know.
From an age point.
I hope Clarence Thomas disqualifies himself from the things having to do with Trump.
Right. Yeah. Probably his wife. He probably won't do that, but
he really should.
He probably should, but. I mean, the court's getting very political. I think that's the other point that you're making, a super valid point, which is, the court was never as political as it seems to have been. Obviously, there was some stuff that happened over the years. I'm just typing in how old is Alito, see what Dr. Google tells us, because it's such an interesting thing now. Have this information at your fingertips. Oh, I'm wrong. I thought he's older. He's 72. Maybe he's in for a while. Yeah.
Another 20 years at least.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I put him in the camp of being similar to Breyer, but I guess I was wrong about that, because I think Breyer's 90, right? Isn't he?
I think he's in his 80s.
80, okay, 83, yeah, born August of 1938, so I guess he'll be 84.
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for stepping in at the last minute because I wanted to get something out, and I do think we're at an inflection point here, and how they handle this is going to be studied for decades. It's going to be a centerpiece of constitutional law class for sure. Let's you
and I monitor it for another month or so.
Absolutely. I'll call you when I think I'm ready, and then hopefully you'll be ready. So I know you'll take your time, but you should. I actually have your printout here of the 7 or 10 pages you sent on that Mississippi law, and I was reading. I said, man, this is like so predictive of everything we talked about. It's right here. Great to have you back. Thanks very much, Rafael.
Nice to see you. Be well, Jack.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.